you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good, good. I'm so excited to be talking to my fellow PV alumni.
Hey, PV.
You know, PV produces productive people,
Yes,
and
it
I'm so
does.
happy to be in the presence
Hey,
of.
listen, hold up. You don't look. Come on, you ain't saying nothing. We
Ah,
out here. We out
let's
here.
do it. Let's look. I
We
don't
out
have my
here.
stuff right here, but look, let's represent, okay? Shout out to our HBCU because they produce
Yes.
productive people such as yourself. I'm so excited to be talking to you. Love your work. Loved you on the mayor.
Thank you.
Loved you on that. But I want to start off from the beginning. You're from New Orleans.
I am.
Your family had to uproot to Texas. I'm also from Texas.
Yeah.
My husband's from New
Hey.
Orleans as well. So I have a connection to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit, Marcel, about what it was like going through that traumatic experience of uprooting to from Hurricane Katrina to Texas at
Mm-hmm.
the age of 16, and how you used that experience to fuel your drive to get you to where you are now, one of Hollywood's up and coming stars.
I think a lot of times the 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 things that we go through in our lives shape us. Like people say that all the time. Like you're shaped by your experiences. And that was something, it was one of those situations that it's a blessing in disguise. It's kind of a lot like I feel like this situation that we're in now with COVID-19 and the changing of the administration of this country. There seems to be a lot of like uneasiness. There seems to be a lot of upheaval of like people's lives. But I feel like we come out of it stronger. Like what doesn't kill you makes you make you that much stronger. And I feel like that's how it was for me during Hurricane Katrina. Like at 16, you think you grown, like you think you think you know what's going on, and you sort of have a plan, like you know exactly what your life is gonna be or what it looks like for you in that moment. You feel like you got everything figured out, and at the time, I thought I had everything figured out, and then a literal act of God like shifted everything completely. So everything that I thought was sure, everything I thought was solid, crumbled underneath my feet. Like everything changed. I'm in a new city, in a completely new environment. I feel more alone than I've ever felt. I feel confused, but I'm the oldest of five. So at the same time, like I have to sort of manage, or I think that my job is to manage like the emotions of my siblings, like to be an example for them. Like I see my parents are struggling trying to figure this out. I don't want to rock the boat any more than it already is. I'm old enough to understand that something ain't right. Like so at this point, like I'm just trying my best to like get settled in this new city and like go to school and do all those things. And as I'm trying to sort of just like muscle through it, because again, we sort of teach kids in general to sort of like stifle their feelings. Like kids aren't allowed to really have feelings. And then with me being a young black man, black men aren't allowed to sort of express those emotions of confusion or sadness or depression. And so it just sort of gets funneled into anger, right? Like it gets funneled into frustration. And so as I'm trying to like muscle through all of these big life changes, I sort of fell into acting. It was a situation to where all the things that I used to do in New Orleans, like I was in a band in New Orleans, I was going to the special school for math and science. I was doing all of these like things that I felt like I identified with. I felt like they were me. And this thing that I had always done, which is acting and performing, is something I kind of took for granted as just something that I just did. Turned out to be the like a life raft. It was the only thing that I had in this new place because all the stuff that I used to do was gone. And I was sort of finding myself and then healing myself with acting. And sort of being able to challenge my emotions into that.
Wow, I mean, you hit some points. You dropped some gems about having to stifle their feelings, like men not really being taught to express their feelings. I think that those are all things that are very true and very prevalent in our community. I love your character, Marty, on the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Love, love, love. I mean, I just love you on screen, period, right?
Thank
How
you.
did this role come to you? How did you land the audition? How did this role come about?
Man, so this role, I got the audition at a time like the mayor had gotten canceled, and I luckily I was smart. I was working on the mayor with Yvette Nicole Brown, and not just Yvette, like everybody around me was telling me to save my money. But Yvette was like watching us spend money, and she was just like, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that." So I had saved my money. So when that show got abruptly canceled, and I realized that I didn't have a job anymore, and like I'm trying to figure out like, do I go back to New York? Do I go back to Texas? Do I go back to New Orleans? Like, what do I do now as an actor in this city? And I was just like, yo, I just gotta hustle. I just gotta like bear down and like see what else. I'll see what other opportunities I can sort of manifest. Like, what can I do? I know like God makes a way, but I gotta be ready. I gotta be at the door. You know what I'm saying? I gotta be there.
Yeah.
So I just like put it in my mind. I put like a marker in the calendar. I was like, this is how much of my savings, this is how much my expenses are gonna, this is how many months I can last in this city with what I have saved. And so I was just hustling. And literally at the last minute, like in the last few months, I got an audition for The Neighborhood. And this is before Cedric is attached to the project. So right now, I don't know any information about this show. I have like a few sides. They didn't give me the full script yet. And I go in, originally, again, the description of Marty was that he was very witty, but he was kind of like, they described him as like being like slender and thin and nerdy and things like that. And I'm going in there, I'm a stallion. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm a
Marcel
I'm a thick brother. You know what I'm saying? Marcel, I'm a thicker brother.
Right.
So I'm going in there and I'm automatically saying, well, I don't know if I'm exactly what casting is looking for, but I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna give it my best shot, because there were things about this character that I really liked. I liked his intellect. I liked his wit. Marty is very petty, and I really enjoyed that aspect of his personality. So I just went in there and I had fun with the role. And they scrapped everybody from that audition. They didn't like anybody. And then I got a call from my agent. They were like, Marcel, they like you, but you got to come in again next week. So I go in, they scrap everybody again. And they're like, Marcel, they like you, so you got to come in again. And that happened like maybe one more time. And then I had like this final callback. And I'm auditioning against Sheon McKinney, who plays my brother on the show, Malcolm. And I'm like, dang, man, if they got Sheon on this show, because I had just seen Vice Principals, I was like, this guy is funny, but he is completely different from me. Like there are no similarities in our styles and the way we approach the role. So I'm like, man, I ain't gonna get this job. I'm not gonna get this job. I'm just gonna go in there and I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna show them what I got, and that's gonna be it. Like I've been in this process for over a month. We'll see. I did it. I got cast in the role. They called me like later on that day. They were like, you got the job. And then literally the next day, they told us that Cedric was going to be our dad.
Wow.
And I was like, man, are you kidding me? Like, that's who they got to play the dad in this show?
Oh, wow. And that's crazy, because the show just works, right? And season 3 just premiered this week on Monday, addressing some timely and relevant social issues that's going on currently that we've been facing all of 2020. I have to ask you, Marcel, being a young Black male from New Orleans, have you ever experienced a similar situation in which the episode depicted, or have you ever been racially profiled at all?
So many times, unfortunately.
How did you handle that?
It's really sad. I was getting a lot of comments like on the page and on Twitter and on my Instagram DMs from fans who were upset and who were frustrated and who felt like politics were sort of invading everything, because they see Black Lives Matter as a political thing. They think it's very partisan, right? It's a left-wing agenda. But for me, Black Lives Matter is literally my everyday. Black lives have to matter because I'm a Black man. Like, they have to. And it doesn't mean that only Black lives matter. It just means that my life is valid. My experience is valid. The promises that the Constitution, like those rights that the Constitution grants us, I deserve those as well as an American citizen. And so it's funny though, because I grew up in the South. Like, I'm from New Orleans. I have family in Mississippi. I have family in Texas. And so we're in these like very Southern states, and you think you get profiled a lot, but it wasn't until I went to New York City that I experienced the most traumatic run-ins with law enforcement and things like that. I've been arrested 3 times, all 3 times because I matched the description of somebody else or because they were looking for somebody else. I've been harassed by police officers a bunch of times. One time I was heading to rehearsal, and mind you, I'm thinking like, yo, I'm a theater kid. I'm a theater kid. I'm going to Columbia University getting my master's degree in acting. That's
Right.
like the nerdiest, safest thing that you can think of.
Right.
And you think you have this false sense of security, right? Like you have that, like I don't subscribe to the sort of respectability politics, but as far as the rules go,
Mm-hmm.
right? When people say just follow the rules, as far as the rules go, I should be safe. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. There was one time I'm walking into the subway and police officers have these like check stations in the subways in New York. Sometimes they have little tables and they'll just randomly stop you and check your bag. I'm late for rehearsal because I'm casually sometimes running on CP time. So I'm going and the train is just getting to the station.
Mm-hmm.
I see the train, I have my bag, I zoom past, swipe my Metro card so I can get on the train so I don't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that as I was running, I guess me running, the police officers found that maybe that was suspicious. So they were like, hey, stop, stop, stop. So they stopped me, they grabbed my bag, yanked me, pressed me up against the wall. One officer has his gun drawn on me. There's two uniformed officers, two plain clothes, push me up against the wall. They dump out my bag, going through my bag, and then I'm literally watching them debate on whether or not they should like hold me, whether or not they should book me, this and the other. And they're trying to figure out what they book me with. Like, am I resisting? Did I evade? Like all this stuff. And I'm sitting there in the subway. I'm embarrassed. All these people are around. My face had just gotten pushed into the wall. They finally let me up and they had me sitting like Indian style in the subway. And this was something that happened like, it happened way too often for my comfort. Right. And so it's one of those things when people are like, oh, well, if you just comply, or if you're not doing anything wrong, like none of that is unfortunately, none of that is my reality. And unfortunately, none of that is the reality of a lot of Black men and women in this country. It's not, there is no right way to be Black in this country when there's a prejudice against people who look like you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, it could have been another George Floyd situation.
No, it really could.
What you just described. I mean, you know what I mean?
It really could. And the thing that blows my mind every time, and the evidence of trauma is now when I get stopped, you're automatically in fight or flight. Mm-hmm. You're automatically in fight or flight because you're like, literally any wrong move you make, if you say the wrong thing, you could be killed, you could be shot. I'm thinking of Sandra Bland, just being a person who is not going to tolerate disrespect, being somebody who's not going to tolerate a cop doing something like that to them and violating their civil rights. If you speak up too loudly or too strongly against somebody trying to ignore your rights and treat you the wrong way, that could get you killed. So now I'm like in this moment, like you're having to make all of these like small decisions so quickly that could have an impact on your entire life if you do the wrong thing or make the wrong choice. It's crazy.
Which is why I think shows like The Neighborhood and you guys touching on this topic are so important because it opens up the conversation for people to have at home, families to have at home.
Yes.
Families who don't look like you and I are able to now sit and see this depicted. They've seen it depicted on screen, on the news all this year. We've seen it longer than we've been, aware of what's been going on. A lot of other people are just now being awakened to it. Right. And so shows like The Neighborhood that touch on these topics, I think it's very important. Marcel, tell us why people should tune in to season 3 of The Neighborhood. Will you guys be talking about other social injustices or other topics like the pandemic at all throughout this season?
So far we haven't touched on the pandemic. Looking at the episodes that we've already done, I think we've done about 7. I don't think we touched on the pandemic. And it's so funny because this first episode was like how we opened up season 3, and because it so directly talked about Black Lives Matter and protests and things of that nature. A lot of people are just like, oh, okay, so what other issues are y'all gonna tackle? But I think the beauty of our show is that it talks about life. It talks about people's real lived experiences. And in that case, in that episode, being a young Black man in that area, that is a reality of that experience. That happens to people all the time. And so we talk about things like that all the time, not so much directly like this is the issue of this episode, but things come up about people's marriages, like marital issues and like whether or not you should go to counseling, because we have 2 couples in our show, one that's been married for about, I think like 9 or 10 years, another one that's been married for about 20 to 30 years. And so they have these 2 very, very committed relationships, just sort of looking at each other under the microscope to see like, what is the maintenance of a long-term relationship? Like that's an issue that we talked about. We talk about the two boys, Malcolm and Marty, sort of becoming men and like finding their individuality in that. We see these men evolve. So like we talk about these really like big life issues in a really, really interesting way, always through the lens of comedy, of course. But we talk about these life issues in a way that I think our audience can appreciate, in a way that I think is approachable to people. Like people invite us into their homes every week. And I think we respect that. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to come in nobody's house and be rude.
Right.
So we take that and we tell them a story that I think they can reflect on, and it inspires conversation, but they can also enjoy and find some laughs in.
And we look forward to continuing to laugh and be educated from the neighborhood. We love you guys. Thank you for the work that you're doing, my brother. So proud of you.
Thank you,
Marcel,
sis.
thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
No problem.
Thank you.
Where is the buzz?
Where is the buzz? You said
We used to be
was
ashamed, bro.
mine.